Alice and I are always looking to be more healthy, and we were just talking about how fasting is one of the best ways to do that, but it's so hard. But the great thing about Prolon is that's not what you're doing. It's not that you're not eating for 5 days. Instead, you're using their science-backed program to convince your body you're fasting.
You guys, this 5-day program really is amazing. It comes beautifully packaged and it does all the thinking for you. Each day is its own box. And by following their program, I know I just feel so much better. And I can't wait to experience Prolong Next Gen and continue to see results. For a limited time, you can be first in line to experience the new Next Gen at special savings. Prolong is offering the Prosecutors listeners 15% off site-wide plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe to their 5-day program. Just visit prolonlife.com/prosecutors. That's PROLONLIFE.com/prosecutors to claim your 15% discount and your bonus gift. prolonlife.com/prosecutors.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Today on The Prosecutors, we return to Delphi, Indiana for an update on the murders of Abby and Libby. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, with my blustery co-host, Alice.
That was good, Brett. Blustery, because we both just survived a tornado.
Yay.
Another one.
I'm used to this by now. So.
Well, you know what I was thinking? I was like, it seems like we're always in tornadoes. But we are rounding up to year 1 of our podcast. This is almost exactly the time last year when a tree fell through your house because of a tornado.
That's a good point. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, no trees fell through the house or fell at all around the house today, though, it was touch and go there for a second.
It was like I've never seen the trees outside my house be horizontal to the ground while still connected to the ground.
Yes, I was recording something with the Riddle Me That, and we saw the Devil podcast. We were doing a little thing on the movie Martyrs, which some of you have probably seen. And I was literally in the middle of it when the tornado sirens began to go off, and I had to tell the ladies that I needed to go to the basement so I wouldn't die. But
that's like the ultimate hall pass, Like you can't lie about that.
Yeah, I know. They really couldn't complain. It's true. So, but in any event, we made it. We survived. We are here tonight to talk to you guys about Delphi. And this case is one that I think, of all the cases we've done, I think this is the one we get the most comments about, the most questions about, and the most requests to do sort of a deep dive follow-up. People are passionate about this case, and they want to see it solved, and it's really inspirational to see how the true crime community has rallied around the family, in particular Kelsey, and really supported this family as they continue to look for the person who is responsible for the deaths of Abby and Libby. And we're going to talk later on about a suspect in this case. But one thing I want to say at the very beginning is keep sharing that flyer. Keep getting the word out about these girls. You would be surprised by how many people still don't know about this case.
Absolutely. We keep coming back to this case and we keep engaging online because it is a case that we've said time and time again that this can be solved. It's going to take some collective knowledge, and I think someone out there knows something, and we're just waiting for that additional piece of information to be the break in this case that we need to find this killer. And so there was recently an anniversary, and there wasn't some big press conference as in years past. And as we've said before, each passing day, each passing year, memories fade. And so it is important to keep this case on people's minds. To mark the anniversary, there was a new episode of Down the Hill, a podcast dedicated to the Delphi murders, Abby and Libby. And in that episode, the sheriff, Tobe Lesenby, confirmed a few things we thought we knew. He indicated that there were fingerprints recovered at the scene, and they had also recovered DNA. And with both pieces of evidence, Sheriff Lesenby was unwilling to say definitively that the evidence came from the perpetrator. Of course, I mean, the issue is unless or until someone is arrested, it's hard to know for sure that the DNA and fingerprints are in fact of the perpetrator. But I think it's a safe assumption. Now, Brett, you have some pretty opinionated thoughts on whether there's actually DNA.
Yeah, I just don't know. The problem with DNA, and frankly the problem with fingerprints, particularly in an outdoor setting such as this, you got a lot of people coming through. A lot of people just think if you find DNA, well, that must be related to the crime. But you pick up DNA all the time, and there's DNA on your clothes that might be from the people who helped put those clothes together, particularly if they're new. I mean, that's something we don't know, right? And then there are the searchers. Could the DNA have come from them? Presumably everybody who was involved with the search and everybody who was involved with the findings of the bodies were DNA tested at some point. But we know, as we talked about when we discussed this case the first time, we don't even know who all was involved in the search. At the time, it was more important to find the girls than it was to catalog those kind of things. And even though this was not a place that was trafficked that often, there were people who lived around there. I just don't know. And Tobe is so vague in everything he says. We're going to talk about this some more. Sometimes I think he says too much. Sometimes I wonder how much he actually knows. I wonder how in the loop he is. And that might be a surprise to some of you, but look, This is a task force. It's a task force that involves the local police, but it also has the state police, and it also has the FBI. And there's a need-to-know basis on this stuff. As you guys know, the authorities have been very close hold with information. It is possible, if not likely, that Tobe doesn't know everything that the rest of law enforcement knows, particularly the leaders of this investigation. So I hope there's DNA. I hope there's fingerprints. And I hope those go to the person who did this, but I do have my doubts.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. And people have talked about people who have put as side by sides as potential suspects have come forward and said, I gave DNA and was cleared. I don't know what that means, that they're cleared, because like Lisenby said, I don't think we know for sure that this DNA is from the perpetrator, but they are collecting DNA, so, I guess maybe we'll find out more one day.
This was the closest we've ever come to a confirmation that they have DNA and fingerprints.
Right, that is true.
This was like the news, basically, from this podcast, so hopefully they do.
Now, Lesenby also said some things that are disturbing. First, he all but confirmed that they do have more audio and video that might be helpful for the case. And yet, Lesenby seemed not to understand how releasing that video might advance efforts to find the killer. He and the interviewer talked about how the police have watched the rest of the video, but that he didn't think that, quote, at this point, Barbara, it would make a huge difference in providing any additional footage. I think that is very wrong. He doesn't say he doesn't think the additional footage is helpful because it's gruesome killing or something disturbing. He seems to indicate that it is additional audio and video that is similar to what we've already seen. But we have such a short clip, we don't even get to really see the gait of the walker. And guys down the hill. 4 words. You can't really hear accents. You can't hear, verbal tics from such a short sample size. And so he seemed to just say, well, you already see the video. You already hear some words. That's enough. You don't really need any more. And I think that's incorrect. The sheriff also suggests that there are no other words on the video, which is, I think, really unlikely.
Totally implausible.
I think it's so unlikely that it honestly makes me wonder if the sheriff's being dishonest, or that, like you said, Brett, he may have no idea what he's talking about, because it doesn't seem plausible that there is more audio, but that there are no additional words.
Yeah, look, we've said this before. We hate to be critical of anybody involved in this case, but I just didn't think Tobe came off too well in this interview. This portion of the interview really kind of made me angry, frankly, when he's talking about suggesting that there's more video. And maybe there's not. I mean, that's the thing. Like, he says things and you're not sure whether he actually has any idea what he's talking about or not. But he's having this back and forth with the interviewer, and the interviewer says something like, is it one of those things where all these police officers sitting here watching it, what could the public add to that? What do you think you could see that the police aren't seeing? And that's just completely wrong. Frankly, obviously the police haven't seen anything in the last 4 years. I mean, they are no closer, it seems, to solving this case than they were before. And I just think, look, what's the harm? If it's not something gruesome and it's not something violent and it's not something that would harm the girls further, then release it. It just seems it seems obvious to me at this point. This is not going to be holdback evidence. This is not going to be evidence that clears somebody. And I just don't understand it.
And he doesn't indicate that it's holdback evidence or that it's germane to the investigation to keep it held back, right? We hear investigators when they are saying, we're not going to tell you any more information because we need it for our investigation. He doesn't say that. He really is just saying, like, nah, you're not going to see anything. Don't worry. Don't bother. That's kind of the tone he takes.
Yeah, and I just got to say, in a case like this that is as widely followed as this is, there is a real danger of an information vacuum that's going to be filled by false rumors, by lies and deception. And honestly, and I don't want to talk too much about this, but I think you saw this after this episode came out and this information wasn't released. You saw people online who were claiming they had all sorts of information that they were going to share, and some of it wasn't really consistent with the things we know, and some of it seemed like good guesses, but it was someone stepping into that vacuum. And I'm not saying they should release everything. They shouldn't. They need to keep back evidence as important to convicting this person, but whatever's on that video, they need to share it. And concerns about, well, I don't even know what the concerns would be, but they need to release it. They should have released it on the anniversary if there's more, because that's a great way to generate more publicity. And publicity is what we need in this case. We need more people with eyes on this case if we're ever going to solve it. And I just feel like they really missed a golden opportunity to do that if there's anything else. And if there's not, just say it. Just say there's nothing else on that video. There is literally no other video.
And Brett, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. I think the takeaway from Lesenby's interview is that really law enforcement are no closer to finding the killer than they were a year ago. And also that they've stubbornly decided not to release any more information now. So I don't think anything's going to change either. They're not closer, and they're not going to be taking any steps to get closer at this point.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about some recent developments in this case, but other than those developments, I just don't feel like we've moved at all since we last talked about this with you. People have asked us many times, oh, do a follow-up on Delphi. We'd love to hear your thoughts on Delphi. We would love to give you more thoughts on Delphi, but there just doesn't seem to be any real movement here. And I think it just feels like the police are spinning their wheels a little bit. And we can hope that there'll be a break in the case, and maybe there has been a break in the case. But at this point, it feels like unless somebody commits a similar crime and there's some DNA or fingerprints that would match something on or at the crime scene, I don't think, it does not seem to me, I am not confident that based on the evidence they have now, the police will ever solve this case. And I hate to be negative like that, because if there's one case I'd like to solve, it's this one. But I don't see it.
Yeah, I agree, Brett. It unfortunately seems like the only way this case may get solved at this point is by accident, right? Someone speaks up, confesses, or the perpetrator takes a misstep. So far, they've been very savvy. They've evaded detection in law enforcement completely, in this case and every other case they may be a part of. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I think that really does bring us to the second thing we want to talk about with you guys, and that is news that you've all heard, and many of you have sent to us, a potential suspect in this case. But I think before we get into that, we need to talk a little bit about this. There are tons of people who reached out to us about this, and they've asked us to address it, and we are going to do that. It is an interesting thing, and frankly, as I've said before, the more we're talking about this case, the better. So we totally understand the interest everybody has in this case. And when I saw this story, I was interested too. And it's hard to deny that the resemblance of the person we're going to talk about and the sketches that we have all seen in this case, it's hard to deny that resemblance. It's a strong resemblance. It absolutely is. But I think everybody should remember a couple things. The first thing is this stuff is very, very difficult on this family. If you guys follow Kelsey on Twitter, you see that. There is not a day that goes by that this family, both families, don't wonder if this will be the day that they find the killer. That's the mantra. This is the day. And they wonder, is this going to be the day? But when a story like this comes out, it truly is a double-edged sword. Sure, it gives some hope. But let's face it. The reality is, it is unlikely that this person is actually the guy. Now, he might be, and we're going to talk about why he might be. But there have been false leads before, leads that felt good. Leads with suspects who matched the sketches. If you did a side-by-side, you're like, that's the guy. They've got the guy. Some of them look just like the sketches. And those leads all failed. None of those people were the killers. They were all cleared. And imagine what that must feel like for the family to have your hopes raised and then dashed over and over and over again. And it doesn't help that people with the best intentions, I'm sure, are continuously tagging Kelsey about the story. I saw it again and again and again and again. I can't even tell you how many times I saw on Twitter her get tagged in these stories. And look, I don't like to tell people what to do. It's a free country. None of you guys care what I think about anything. But please don't tag Kelsey on stories like this. She knows. She knows. She follows this case closer than anybody. She knows what's going on. She probably knew about this guy in this story before we did. Wouldn't surprise me if the police didn't reach out to her and to her family before any of us knew about it. And you can believe that she will comment it on if it's necessary. If the next day he confesses, don't you worry. She's going to know, and she's going to share it with everybody. And I know this comes from a good place. We want this family to get justice. And we're so excited every time there's a break that we jump at the opportunity to push the story around. We're all praying for that. But until the police announce that they have their man, we really do have to take a step back. But that doesn't mean there isn't anything you can do to help. As I've said before, any opportunity to get this story out there is a good one. People are paying attention to Delphi again because of this story. And if people are posting the updated poster that Kelsey has been tweeting, we're going to throw it up on our website. If you're watching YouTube right now, you are seeing it. It is the background of this video. We need to be sharing that poster. At the end of the day, we're going to talk about this guy. Maybe it's him. But if it's not, the more we can spread that guy's face, the guy who did it, the suspect, to every corner of the internet and all over the world, the more we can do that, the more likely that somebody is going to come forward and say they recognize his face. And I really want to emphasize this. This is one of the reasons we wanted to do this update. if you are listening to this and you have even an inkling that you might know what happened here, or you might know the person involved, or you might know the guy in the poster, please, please, please do not let this story about a potential suspect stop you from making a tip. If you make the tip and it's this guy everybody's paying attention to now, no harm comes of it. The tip goes away. Nobody ever knows you made it. You can move on with your life knowing that, you don't know a double murder of children. It can do absolutely no harm whatsoever to make that tip. Do it. The only thing that can hurt is if you stop talking about this case, or if you don't leave a tip because of this new suspect that a lot of people are talking about, James Chadwell.
So let's talk about James Chadwell. James Chadwell is a 42-year-old man from Lafayette, Indiana. On April 19th of this year, he lured a 9-year-old girl into his home under the pretext of petting his dogs. When her parents realized she was missing, they jumped on it. They called the police, and thank goodness they jumped into action so quickly. Chadwell was a neighbor of the family, and when the police initially questioned him, he said he'd seen the girl earlier, but she'd left the residence.
Which is totally unbelievable, by the way.
Yeah.
This is an interesting story just because, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, the stuff that Chadwell did was just so idiotic. But anyways, please continue.
And we see this a lot, by the way. It's not uncommon that there are this many missteps, which, by the way, is why the Delphi murders has captured so many people's attentions, that the perpetrator seemingly took no missteps, in the sense that they're not captured yet. So let's talk about Chadwell. Now, the police looked all over the neighborhood for this 9-year-old girl, and when they could not find her, they returned again to Chadwell's home, and they asked permission to search the home. Permission that Chadwell, as a person who was on probation, could not refuse. That was one of the terms of his probation. Now, when the police came in, they noticed that the basement was secured with a chain lock, and upon opening it, they found the girl naked and crying. The girl said that Chadwell had struck her on the head several times when she tried to fight him until she was knocked unconscious. And when she woke up, she had no clothes on, and he had taken her to the basement. He had raped her and strangled her, and also had his dog bite her. This is really horrendous. And when the police found her, across her neck were lateral strangulation marks, and she had broken blood vessels with black eyes, bruising to her head, arms and legs, and bite marks. In other words, very serious injuries to her. I think he was going to kill her. And thank goodness the police came back and really forced their way into his home to search it. Chadwell was arrested and charged with attempted murder, attempted intentional killing of another, child molesting, where the defendant is at least 21 years of age, kidnapping, where the victim is less than 14 years of age, criminal confinement resulting in serious bodily injury, battery resulting in serious bodily injury, and strangulation. In other words, they did not hold back on any of the charges that they could throw at him.
Yeah.
It's hard to read all of that to you because this is just horrendous that a human being can do this to a child. And thank goodness she was alive when they found her and that she was able to tell them what he had done to her.
Yeah, I mean, this is a reminder that monsters walk among us. I got to take a moment.
And had lived in the neighborhood, next to this girl for some time.
Right. And nobody had any idea that he was there. There's a lot to unpack here. I mean, number one, this guy's evil. I mean, he's evil. That's the only word I've got for him. Hopefully they put him under the jail and he never gets out. And with the charges he's got, I would expect he will never get out of jail, and that's a good thing. That's a great thing. I mean, it is just hard to overstate this. It's such a violent and awful attack on a 9-year-old girl unimaginable for good reason for most of us to even think that somebody could do something like this to a child. And yet, I mean, where to even start? I mean, everything about it is horrible. I have no doubt he was going to kill this girl. I have no doubt. If the police, and Alice said it, praise to the parents and the police. We talked about this in other cases where delay is the great enemy. Delay is the enemy. And if the police hadn't taken this seriously, if they had just said, she's probably hiding somewhere in the house, call us back in a few hours if she doesn't turn up. Imagine if the police had said that. This girl would be dead by now, and we probably wouldn't know what happened to her. I'm sure he would have gotten rid of the body, and we'd have had no idea. But because the police acted as quickly as they did, this was as bad as it is, and as bad as what happened, a greater tragedy was avoided.
As you can tell, this is a horrendous story in and of itself, but it is close to Delphi. It is another young girl who was, I think, going to be murdered had police not intervened. And so because of these factors, Sheriff Lesenby has said that there are several factors leading police to look at Chadwell. He didn't say specifically what factors, but I think those are likely the factors. The closeness and also the age of this young girl.
And we're going to talk about this, and obviously a lot of people are talking about this. I really kind of wish he hadn't said that. I don't really understand what is added by Lesenby saying that. I mean, it doesn't necessarily take anything away either, but I have seen this statement all over the place, right? I mean, there were plenty of people who were looking at this guy and speculating about him, but once Lesenby said that, I mean, I saw it, in the Daily Mail in the UK talking about this. And this sort of goes to what we were talking about earlier. I'm sure the family was like, oh God, because their position is don't make people think that this is the guy, even if he might be the guy, because it encourages people to stop looking. It encourages people to think, well, man, I'm glad they solved that Delphi case. I can move on. And Kelsey even talked about how this has happened in relation to previous suspects. There was one suspect who a lot of people have talked about, an early suspect who has been cleared, and Kelsey says people still come up to her and say, oh, I thought they solved that. And this statement by Lesenby kind of goes to what I was saying earlier. I'm not sure why he says some of the things he did. There are things that make you think this might be the guy. We're about to go through them. But the sheriff who's in charge of the investigation is probably not the person who should be making that kind of comment. But, we are where we are. It is what it is. So, what are you going to do? Okay, so why might this be the Delphi killer? What might Lesenby be talking about? The first thing, and I think the biggest thing, is Chadwell does fit the profile. He obviously is a sex offender. I don't think he's previously been convicted of a sex offense, which may be significant. That may be one reason he hasn't been looked at before, but he certainly is a sex offender. Innocent till proven guilty, understand that. He's going to be convicted of all these charges. No question about that. And he's somebody who apparently likes to attack and rape little girls. That should be enough, but he's also somebody who has a long and extensive record. This is not his first run-in with the law. He has a number of prior convictions for aggravated assault and possession of firearms. Now, we talked about this when we were talking about the murder, and we were sort of going through what kind of person this would be. And although we weren't sure whether or not this person had ever committed a murder, and certainly not another child murder, one thing we felt confident about is that whoever did this was not their first act of violence. This was not their first rodeo. This was somebody who had been violent before. You don't start off murdering two children. Not ordinarily. Something is in your background. Whether it's sort of the iron triangle of serial killers includes torturing animals. That's a lot of serial killers start with that. They start with torturing animals, they move on to people. Maybe that's what it is, but a lot of times I think it is other acts of violence against people. He had this. Chadwell had done that, and now you add to that the fact that he is a sex offender who has targeted children.
And one thing to note, remember, we have not been confirmed that there was any sexual assault on Abby and Libby, but I think the fact that a lot of people have wondered if there was something about it. And certainly the perpetrator picked two young girls to attack in Delphi. And Chadwell here, obviously, did sexually assault this young girl.
And for some reason, it could be a sexual thing or it could be a violence thing. It's hard to know, right? A lot of violent offenders, sex may be part of their violence, but it's not necessarily the reason for it. A lot of people say that, rape is not about sex. It's about violence. It's about control. We don't know what it is in the mind of whoever did this that leads them, or led them in this case, to attack Abby and Libby. It's possible that this was a sex offender. It's possible that we don't know, and we're not going to speculate about what might have happened there. But it's certainly also possible, as we've said before, that they did not intend to kill them there, that they intended to take them to somewhere else. Maybe, Chadwell obviously has his torture dungeon or whatever in his house. It could have been something like that, where they wanted to do something like that. So hard to say for sure, but certainly the fact that Chadwell's been implicated in a crime like this makes it more likely, in my mind at least, that he would be a viable suspect. Now, we had speculated, not because we have anything against, blue-collar outdoorsy folks, but based on the way Bridge Guy was dressed, the area, sort of a rural area, we thought this was a local, and so we thought this was probably somebody who works with their hands, probably a blue-collar type guy. Chadwell is a welder by trade. He works with his hands, which was another thing. We thought it would be someone who works with their hands. And he has an affinity for the outdoors. This is something really interesting about him. Many of his Facebook photos show him camping or exploring the outdoors. Many of them show bridges. Some of them show railroad bridges, though, to be clear, not the Monon High Bridge. And one of the posts that I found to be one of the most interesting, Chadwell writes, quote, "Sleeping under a bridge for a while till work starts. Only 10 days. Cool, dry, no neighbors, and the bridge is only 6 minutes from work. Be thankful for the little things." So this is a guy who not only spent time outdoors, but for 10 days it sounds like he was sleeping under a bridge. This made me think, I wonder if the police found anything under the Monon High Bridge. There's always been speculation that whatever was going on beneath the Monon High Bridge had something to do with this. Some of it's silly. There's one that there was like a meth lab under the bridge. I mean, okay, maybe there was. It's a weird place to have a meth lab out in the middle of, a state park where people are routinely going and taking pictures. But having said that, it's possible. And you can imagine if somebody was camping out under that bridge, that actually answers a lot of questions. It tells us why no one saw this person going into the park. It might tell us why nobody saw them wearing bloody clothes. You could imagine this person kills Abby and Libby. They return to their location under the bridge. They change clothes, and then they walk out. And this was always been one of the things that people really wondered, because there's an assumption here based on, rumors you may or may not believe, based on those text messages from one of the people who apparently found the bodies, that a knife was involved, that the girls were stabbed in some way. Hard to do that and not get blood all over you. And that's been a question. When we talked to the captain about this case, that was one of the things he talked about. Like, nobody saw some guy walking out with blood all over him. Well, this actually would kind of tell you why that might be the case. It might also tell you why there hasn't been a vehicle found. We know the police want to find a vehicle that was parked at the abandoned CPS building, but we don't actually know that has anything to do with this case. Possible there was no car. Possible this person had their stuff with them, walked out of there, and was gone.
And Brett, the most obvious thing about this is we always talk about how hunters hunt in their backyard. This would quite literally be his backyard if he had been camping under the Monon High Bridge. And he didn't lure the girls there. He was just lying in wait like a lion does in the savannah behind tall grass.
Yeah, and like I said, we are not saying that there's any evidence up to this point that he was ever at the Monon High Bridge or that the person who killed them was camping underneath the bridge. But it's something that is an interesting thought, and it really makes everything make a lot more sense. It makes you understand why this person would feel more comfortable there. And think about it this way. Say it were Chadwell, and say he was camping under the bridge. One thing people have said, and we'll talk about this in a minute, is that the MO doesn't really match. In this case, Chadwell takes a girl to his own home to murder her. That's not what's happening here. But as Alice said, if he were camping there, then yeah, it kind of was. It would be very similar. Another thing that's important. The murderer is from the area. There's no question in my mind about that. I have no doubt that they have lived either in Delphi or near Delphi recently. And I would bet $1 to a Krispy Kreme donut that the police believe that as well. At the time of the murders, Chadwell lived in Kokomo, Indiana, which is about 30 miles from Delphi. Kokomo often comes up in conspiracy theories about Delphi, but not any that mention Chadwell. They're sort of different from this case, or from Chadwell, and some of you know those rumors, and I'm not going to get into them, but like I said, Kokomo comes up, and there are people who think someone from Kokomo was involved. He lived there at the time. Lafayette itself is only about 14, 15 miles away from Delphi, and apparently Chadwell has kind of lived, or his Facebook posts indicate he's been all around Delphi. There's nothing that puts him in Delphi. There's no smoking gun like that, but it certainly seems like this was an area with which he was familiar.
Especially if he is an explorer and likes to be outside. Delphi, Indiana is, it's very rural, it's pretty. It would make complete sense that he would explore within 30 minutes of his home.
And look, guys, unless we're wrong, unless the Delphi police have some leads that we don't know about, and we certainly hope they do, and maybe those leads are closing in on the killer even as we speak. Unless that's the case, this is probably how we are going to catch this killer. Now, we haven't found him yet, and barring a tip from the public, who knows whether we're going to find this guy with the evidence we have now, unless he is involved in another similar crime. We've always said we don't want it to happen. We don't ever want this guy to strike again. But unfortunately, that is often the way you find serial killers, is they're going to strike again and you hope that they slip up. It may not be Chadwell who did this, but I think it is likely that one day a headline like this one is the one that will lead to this killer.
We've made a somewhat, I would say, compelling argument about how Chadwell could be the Delphi killer. Now I'm going to be that cold water prosecutor and tell you why he might not be the Delphi killer. Brett already said this. The MO just doesn't match. The Delphi killer went to a park to hunt his prey, and he was able to capture them and kill them and get away. Chadwell's offense seems far less planned and far more spontaneous. And honestly, it was really dumb the way he even carried it out. He kidnapped a girl from his neighborhood. If a 9-year-old child is missing, they're going to look in the neighborhood because 9-year-old kids can't drive. They don't usually have access to vehicles to get them far away. So the first place police are going to look in the neighborhood. So he is hunting way too close to his own home to really get away with this. And he assaulted her in his own house. He didn't even take her to a remote location where it would be difficult to track where they are. Other than the crimes involving a young girl, these two crimes, the Delphi and Chadwell's crimes, just don't really seem all that similar. Still, it's possible that the Delphi killer isn't as smart as people make him out to be. Maybe he isn't this savvy serial killer, and he's just eluded all of us for years. We know that many of the things the Delphi killer did just seemed downright foolish. He attacked 2 girls in broad daylight, and he got away with it because he was lucky. Maybe it wasn't because he was good. So maybe the luck that he had in the Delphi murders emboldened him. And it was because of feeling like he could get away with anything, Chadwell decided to try again with a similarly bold and foolish attack. And this time it didn't work out. Sure, that is possible. But I don't think the crimes really look that similar other than the fact that they involved young girls.
Yeah, I don't really either. We've talked about why they might be similar, and those things might be true, but it certainly seems like this is not the same MO. I do think the points you make, though, are worth reiterating. People talk about this guy all the time online like he's some mastermind, like he's some Moriarty, this great criminal who escaped detection, and it couldn't be Chadwell because he's a moron compared to this amazing murderer. And I think BG is kind of a moron. I think the stuff he did was really stupid. I think attacking girls in the middle of the day, 2 girls in the middle of the day, when one of them managed to film him, he is incredibly lucky that he got away with that and that nobody saw him. There were so many things that could have gone wrong. There were so many ways that could have fallen apart. And frankly, we often do this with criminals. We act like they're some sort of geniuses. I mean, Ted Bundy gets treated as though he was some sort of genius killer. One of the reasons they found him is because he introduced himself to his victims as Ted. Like, come on, dude, at least use an alias, But, and I think that's just, until we find the guy, we always act like, wow, he must be some sort of genius. And a lot of times they're not. They are just lucky. And I think Bridge Guy was lucky. And because he was lucky and not good, I think it's possible that he could do something as dumb as what Chadwell did.
I will push back slightly on that, and we'll move on from that. Yes, I think he absolutely was lucky, but I also think he was sophisticated to a degree that I don't see here with Chadwell, and that's because it is actually very difficult to control and carry out the killing of 2 individual girls. And Abby and Libby weren't small children. They were not 9-year-olds. They were the size of full-grown women. At least Libby was. She was near 200 pounds, and it would be difficult to fight off 2 girls. We call them girls, but really they were, preteen teenagers. So I think there was a level of sophistication there, married with a lot of luck.
I'll say one thing. I'm going to agree with you on that in one very important way. Remember how Bridge Guy did it. Remember how he gained control of them. Remember that audio, the down the hill. The control, the authority, the command that you had there. That was a very different thing than what Chadwell did. Chadwell is pulling out one of the most cliche tricks in the book to get this girl inside his house. Do you want to come pet my dog? It worked on a 9-year-old, right? But pretty weak. And I just feel like Bridge Guy's approach does tend to indicate someone, like Alice said, a little bit more savvy than what we're seeing in Chadwell.
Another factor pointing against Chadwell being the Delphi killer is that they just haven't found Chadwell before. We told you that Chadwell has a very violent criminal history, and he was actually on probation at the time of this crime against this 9-year-old girl. And due to the proximity to Delphi, you really would have think that he would have been one of the people that law enforcement looked at when investigating this crime. If it is true that the police have DNA, they likely ran it through the known database. And we said this before, that it would be surprising if Chadwell weren't in that database already based on his criminal history. What we do know is they didn't get a ping off of that database. Otherwise, we'd probably have more leads and probable cause to execute a search warrant and probable cause to seek an indictment. But we know that Chadwell certainly is in the database now. And of course, that assumes we have usable DNA, which, as Brett already mentioned, and I tend to agree with you there, Brett, it's far from certain that there is DNA. It shouldn't take very long to rule in or rule out Chadwell if, in fact, they have definitive DNA from the Delphi crime scene.
Yeah, you would kind of think this is also sort of an interesting attempt to guess at what the police have and don't have. You would think if they did have usable DNA, we already would have ruled him out. I mean, Listenby went out and put his foot in his mouth and said they're looking at him for all sorts of reasons. They now have an obligation to come out and say it's not him as soon as they know it's not him. Who knows? We're recording this now. We're planning on releasing it next week. Maybe in the meantime, maybe in 10 minutes here, you're going to hear an update where we've eliminated Chadwell as a suspect, but they certainly haven't done it yet as of this recording. It's possible that they don't have the DNA. It's possible they just haven't announced it yet or they haven't ran it yet. Chadwell's not going anywhere, so maybe it's not that much of a rush. It's also possible, as we said earlier, that because he wasn't necessarily a child sex offender, that the police never noticed him up to this point, and they didn't look at him. Unfortunately, as we're about to discuss, there are a lot of suspects out there, but Chadwell was close. He was close, and I think his record was violent enough that it would not have surprised me if the police had given him a look before.
Right. And now here is another thing. Unfortunately, Chadwell isn't rare. Now, given the vague descriptions we have of Bridge Guy, it's truly the case, as Kelsey has said, that he fits, quote, half of Indiana. And sadly, there are many, many sexual predators out there, far more than you want to know about. And that's why Kelsey has repeatedly said that if she got her hopes up every time someone was identified as a possible suspect, she'd be constantly crushed. So, as horrifying as Chadwell's crime is, I hate to tell you, especially you parents, he is not rare. There are a lot of sexual predators out there. Don't go look at the sexual offense registry near your house. You might get too scared about where you live.
Yeah, absolutely.
People have focused on Chadwell not just because of the similarities of the crime, partly because he looks and sounds like Bridge Guy, but that's actually led us astray before. There's a reason the family has constantly cautioned us against side-by-sides. There have been so many side-by-sides over the years, and I've seen these side-by-sides where I think, yeah, if we're just talking about side-by-sides, it looks like an exact match of this picture of someone on Facebook with the sketch. And that's a big reason that we cautioned you all against side-by-sides, because it leads to accusing innocent people. There is one killer. So every side-by-side that is done likely victimizes someone who's innocent. We don't have to worry about that with Chadwell because he's a scumbag. He is not some innocent person. But the other side of things is that it leads people to think that this case is solved, just like Brett said. And so while it's wonderful people are talking about Delphi, it would be bad if everyone's talking about Delphi as if, oh, Chadwell's behind bars, we're all safe now, this has been solved. We'll repeat what we said before. This case can be solved, and I think will be solved, but not if we're distracted. We should certainly look into Chadwell. He's an obvious person that should be looked into, and the police really should clear him if they know definitively he is not Bridge Guy. But don't get distracted. Until there is a conviction, it's still wide open.
Yeah, we really all have to be in this together. We believe deeply in the power of the true crime community to solve cases. And I think most of law enforcement does. Whether it's Unsolved Mysteries or America's Most Wanted or the FBI's Most Wanted list, the whole reason for that is a belief that if we can get this information out there, we're going to get information from the public that will help us solve a crime. And that's the kind of information we need here. That's how we're going to solve this case. So I am glad that people are talking about this case, but I do hope that we will all try as we discuss it. And I'm not saying don't discuss it. I don't know how you wouldn't. I mean, that's human nature. This is really interesting. It's all over the news, but try to also spread that flyer around with the poster, with the images of Bridge Guy, in case it's not this guy. If it's not this guy, then the fact that he's been arrested might put some wind in our sails and get this stuff out there better. And I think that's the way we can turn this story into a positive and into something that can help us solve this case. We get it. There's a lot of similarities here. I've seen the tattoos. We've all seen the tattoos. I'll just for the record, I'll say there's been a lot of people who've said he's had those tattoos for way before the Delphi murders. They don't have anything to do with those. We're going to find out whether that's true. I'm sure that's something the police will be looking into. But really, all we can do at this point is speculate. And I think if we speculate without, at the same time, trying to honor the family's wishes and move that poster around and get out the good word and spread the facts of this case and the fact that these two girls deserve justice, if we don't do that, then this is a missed opportunity. And I don't think we should let it be a missed opportunity. I hope in a couple weeks we're all talking about Chadwell being arrested and charged with these two murders. That would be the most amazing thing in the world. But I think we all have to temper our expectations and realize that it's just never that easy. You know, these cases are hard for a reason, and this has been a particularly difficult one. I know you guys are really interested in this. I know you have questions and comments. We'd love to hear that. We've enjoyed all your questions and comments on Delphi we've received up to this point. You guys have been amazing on this case. The number of people who've reached out to us and said that they have made a tip to the tip line after hearing our show. I mean, that makes me feel good. I hope that one of those tips is the tip that solves this case. I hope you will continue to do that. If you have a tip that you think could solve this case, there are a couple different ways you could do that. Number one, you could email tips to Abby and Libby Tip, and that's ABBY and LIBBY Tip at CACOSHRF. I assume that's Carroll County Sheriff.com. That's at CACOSHRF.com. Like I said, if you're looking at the flyer right now, you see that tip line on the flyer. You can also, if you would rather call in the tip line, I'll give you the tip line number. It's 844-459-5786. That's 844-459-5786. If you'd rather send the tip to us, feel free. We will get it to the right people. Our email address is prosecutorspod@gmail.com. Or if you just have thoughts you want to share on this case, please email us there. We'd also love to see you on social media at prosecutorspod on all the social media. Reach out to us and let us know what you think about this case or any other case. Well, Alice, do you have anything else you want to share with the best fans in the world before we sign off?
No, but sorry for this frustrating episode because I think the takeaway is that there isn't much development in this case so far.
But let me say this. You know, we talked about why Chadwell might be the guy. Whoever it is going to have those characteristics. So if you know somebody with those characteristics, that is a person to consider. You know, if you know somebody who fits not only the description, but also has those similar characteristics, was in that area at the time, knows the area, is an outdoorsman, think about those people. Those people might be the ones who are responsible for this. Like Alice said, this is a frustrating case because we all want it to be solved, but it's only going to be solved by you guys. And I believe we can do that. Well, CrimeCon is only about 2 weeks, 3 weeks away when you hear this. If you don't have your tickets already and you want to get them, sign up and use Prosecutors for 10% off. We'd love to see you guys in Austin at the end of this month, beginning of June. Talk to you about this case and the other case. We're really excited. Alice and I just bought our plane tickets. We've got our hotel rooms. Everything is on track. As long as the tree doesn't fall in my house, we will be there at the end of May. End of May, beginning of June. Well, guys, we're going to wrap it up for tonight. Next week, we'll have a new case for you, one that actually has some similarities to the Delphi case and that some people think might be connected to that case. We'll talk about that next week, but until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Hey, I'm glad we booked our tickets to CrimeCon. Me too. It's going to be awesome.
I'll probably end up staying with like family. They probably will be mad if I don't.
So you have, obligations to the crime world.
To the crime world.
The true crime world, not the, crime lords. Anyway. Well, Alice, pleasure as always to join you tonight.
Thank you. I'm sorry it's so late. Because, we were both hiding from a tornado.
Yeah.
It was like dinner time, and all of a sudden, I heard in real life the tornado siren.
The sirens?
Because they test the sirens every month, but I've never heard the sirens like in real life.
In real life?
That was intense.
I heard them go off, and I was like, ugh.
Not again.
If you're looking to streamline your audio advertising buys and maximize your revenue, look no further than Triton Digital's programmatic audio advertising exchange, A2X. The private exchange consists of only licensed broadcasters and top-tier internet radio publishers, assuring the quality inventory and brand safety you can trust. Visit www.tritondigital.com to learn more.